Howard nodded dumbly. His profound embarrassment with his childish act had stilled his tongue and rendered him incapable of speech. Anita efficiently stripped his wet overalls and undies from his diminutive body, set the stopper on the tub and twisted the taps on the tub to begin filling it with warm water. The pounding of the water beating against the bottom of the tub filled his ears as he stood nakedly in the tub dressed solely in his t-shirt. He looked on helplessly while Anita finished mopping up his mess with the towel. When she was done, she took his pants and the towel to the utility room for washing. The water was up to his shins when she returned and pulled his t-shirt over his head. Then she ordered him to sit in the tub and turned off the taps. Howard complied passively, not wanting to start an argument after having made such an utter fool of himself. He was thankful that Anita hadn't commented on his accident. She could have made a fuss and told him what a child he was. Instead, she cleaned up his mess without a hint of approbation. "Stay there and soak for a while, honey. Don't worry if you have another accident while you're in the tub. I'm going to rinse it out after you have your bath anyway, okay?" she said kindly. Howard blushed a deep crimson at the mention of his accident and nodded quietly in agreement. He wanted to tell her that he wasn't about to have another accident, but the words wouldn't come out. Besides, he couldn't be sure that his bladder wouldn't cut loose again unexpectedly. It was best if he remained there as she suggested and let the clean water wash away all traces of his sin. After half an hour, she returned and ordered him to stand up in the tub. She took a bar of ivory soap and lathered him quickly, then took a washcloth and began to bathe him. When he tried to take the washcloth from her hand to bathe himself, she playfully slapped his hand away and continued her ministrations. After he was completely scrubbed, she dipped the cloth in the water and rinsed it out before wiping the remnants of the suds from his body. In a few minutes he was free of soap and she opened the stopper on the tub. Anita wrung out the cloth and hung it over the shower curtain rod to dry, then lifted him out of the tub as if he was a little boy. She grabbed a terry cloth towel from the towel bar and knelt down beside him. Then she began to vigorously buff him dry with the fluffy fabric. When she was done, she said not a word as she stood up, bent over and picked him up in her arms and carried him to the bedroom. Howard was humiliated. Never in his adult life had anyone treated him like a child. He felt helpless in her arms. His nakedness next to her fully clothed body only served to empathize how defenseless he had become. His back while her other hand supported his 4-year-old bottom easily in her palm. When they reached the bedroom, she sat him on the bed and got a pair of clean underwear from the drawer. She made him lie back on the bed while she slipped his feet through the leg holes and pulled them down to his knees. Then she took his hands in hers and pulled him to a sitting position before helping him off the bed. Howard reached down to tug the underwear up his thighs, but she slapped his hands away so she could dress him herself. When she pulled them over his bottom, he was surprised at how soft and comfortable his underwear felt. They were tighter than he would have liked, but the feel of the plushy fabric against his skin made him feel like they were caressing his bottom. When he looked down at the front of his briefs, he saw to his dismay that they had no fly for urinating. What kind of boys' briefs are these? He thought to himself in confusion. He fingered the soft cloth with his hand and discovered that they were thickly padded through the crotch with what felt like resilient foam padding and tight elastic at the leg openings. All at once, his small size, the lack of a fly on the brief, the foam padding and the elasticized legs concatenated themselves into a realization of what the briefs must be, and he thought in shock, training pants. Anita's put me in toddler's training pants. His embarrassment at wetting himself was forgotten as he thought to himself furiously, what the hell does she think she's doing? She has no business making decisions like that without my approval. I wear the pants in this family, not her. Sitting in nothing but a paper gown was bad. Listening to Heather and Danielle fight was worse. All illusions of what a mother-daughter bond should look like quickly dissolved before Ella's eyes. The tension in the air was so thick she could feel it wrap around her lungs and begin to squeeze. "Why can't I see the doctor by myself?" Danielle demanded. She stood in the corner, arms crossed and still fully clothed. When the medical assistant had led them in and handed them each a gown, Ella had wasted no time stripping down. Danielle had merely scoffed at the idea. "Because I said so," Heather hissed. The reason seemed to change every time Danielle asked the question. At first, the answer had been because she was too young, then it had switched to the doctor being male. "He'll be here any minute. Get changed." An exacerbated Heather growled. "I'm not changing in front of you guys," Danielle protested. "Nobody cares what you look like in your underwear. Why are you pretending to be shy? I caught you streaking down the hall last week." "Mom," Danielle whined, drawing out every syllable. "I don't want to change in front of her. I'm on my, you know." "So what? You've seen her in a diaper. I doubt she cares if you're in a pad." "But it leaked," Danielle mumbled. Heather groaned and swore under her breath. "Just get changed." Ella looked from Heather to Danielle as they glared at each other, each silently fighting a battle of wills. Danielle was the one to finally cave. She grabbed the gown off the table and spun around while mumbling under her breath. Ella was at first relieved in a way when she had seen the bulge in Danielle's underwear. At least she wasn't the only one who needed some kind of diaper. Perhaps her situation wasn't that weird. Speaking of weird though, she eyed Danielle's underwear for a second before she inwardly gasped and looked away. She could feel the color draining from her face. What she had thought was a tie-dye design was none other than splotches of blood. Ella groped blindly in the air until she felt Heather's arm. She anchored herself to the woman, ignoring Heather's worried concerns, and waited until the room righted itself again. Her stomach began involuntarily doing somersaults. She stared at her bare feet as she felt a hand press against her forehead. "Poor thing," Heather said. "You're running a fever." Why was she worried about her? Couldn't she see her daughter was bleeding? Her mind flashed back to the time she had pneumonia. She had been coughing up blood then, and it had caused a panic. Was it like that? Was she hurt? What kind of disease did she have? Was she terminal like Ella had been once labeled? With a face full of concern and panic. "I know, being sick is no fun, huh?" Heather said. Ella shook her head and pointed at Danielle. "What's wrong?" Ella silently mouthed. "I ask myself that every day," Heather grumbled. "Don't worry about her, she's just being ornery because she knows she's getting a shot." Ella shook her head and pointed more frantically. Heather hadn't seen. She didn't know Danielle was sick. "What's wrong? I don't understand. Did little Timmy fall down the well?" Danielle threw in sarcastically. "Danielle," Heather hissed before turning back to Ella, who was now pulling the notepad out of her shorts pocket that were on the floor. "She's bleeding." Heather looked at the note perplexed until realization dawned on her. "Don't worry about that." "Is she sick?" Heather smiled a little and shook her head. "No, she's not sick." Ella looked at her puzzled. "What? What's wrong?" Danielle asked. She got up and looked at the notepad before burying her face in her hands. "This is exactly why I didn't want to get changed. This one's on you. I'm not telling her."